At 0300 station time, Amelia led her team through Section 7's maintenance corridors toward the command center. Zara's infiltration of the station's systems had provided detailed schematics, but the real challenge would be reaching Valerius without triggering his contingency protocols. "Security rotation change in 30 seconds," Zara whispered through their comms, her fingers dancing across a portable interface that gave her ghost-like access to the station's systems. "I'm creating a maintenance alert that will draw the guards away from the primary access point." Major Harrison checked his weapons one final time, non-lethal neural disruptors that would incapacitate without permanent damage. Their mission required Valerius alive and functional. "Remember, we need him conscious and able to access his communication systems." Lieutenant Commander Voss monitored fleet communications through a heavily encrypted link. "Admiral Reyes confirms Imperial defensive positions are set. We have 47 fleets positioned along the outer rim, but they're outnumbered 3-1 based on our intelligence estimates. Then we'd better make sure those intelligence estimates reach the Void Collective Invasion Force," Amelia replied grimly. The command center lay behind multiple security barriers, each more sophisticated than the last. Biometric scanners, quantum encryption locks, and energy fields that could slice through molecular bonds. But Sanctuary Station's reputation for discretion worked against its own security. The systems were designed to be circumvented by those with proper authorization codes. "Almost there," Zara reported as they bypassed the final barrier. "I'm reading life signs in the central chamber. One human, neural patterns consistent with intense concentration. He's working. At this hour? The invasion timeline has been accelerated. He's probably coordinating final preparations." They emerged from the maintenance corridor into a chamber that defied the station's utilitarian architecture. Built like an amphitheater, the command center featured a central platform surrounded by holographic displays showing star maps, fleet positions, and communication networks spanning multiple galaxies. At its heart stood a figure Amelia recognized from Imperial historical records, though he looked far older than his supposed death date would suggest. Admiral Valerius Constantine, rightful heir to the Imperial throne, orchestrator of its destruction. He turned as they entered, and Amelia saw none of the surprise she had expected. Instead, his weathered face showed something approaching relief. "Captain Chin," he said in a voice that carried the authority of command despite the circumstances. "I wondered when you would find me." "Admiral Constantine," Amelia replied, keeping her weapon trained on him while scanning for threats. "Or do you prefer the architect?" "My name is sufficient. I assume you're here to stop me from completing my work." He gestured to the displays around them, showing Void Collective fleets now less than 12 hours from Imperial borders. "You're too late." "Maybe. But you're going to help us minimize the damage." Valerius laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Help you? Captain, you have no idea what you're trying to preserve. The Empire is a rotting corpse, held together by tradition and the fear of change. I'm simply accelerating its inevitable collapse." Major Harrison moved to secure the chamber's secondary exits while Zara began accessing the communication systems. "Why?" she asked as her fingers flew across the control interfaces. "You could have ruled. You could have reformed the Empire from within." "Reform?" Valerius's eyes blazed with the fervor of absolute conviction. "Child, I spent 40 years watching the Empire's slow decline. Corruption in every sector, stagnation masquerading as stability, and a population grown soft through centuries of unchallenged dominance. The Void Collective offers something better: unity of purpose, efficiency of action, evolution beyond the limitations of individual consciousness. They're going to process trillions of sentient beings." Lieutenant Commander Voss protested. "How is that better?" "Because those beings will become part of something greater. The collective doesn't destroy, it incorporates, improves, perfects. What you call processing, I call transcendence." Amelia realized they were facing something worse than simple treason. Valerius hadn't just betrayed the Empire, he had become a true believer in its enemy's cause. "You're insane." "Am I? Look around you, Captain. Your empire spans 47 galaxies, yet cannot prevent corruption from reaching its highest levels. Your military is scattered across impossible distances, your government is riddled with competing interests, and your people are more concerned with comfort than survival. The collective will change all of that. By destroying individual consciousness, Amelia said flatly. By eliminating the inefficiencies that individual consciousness creates. No more conflicting agendas, no more political maneuvering, no more waste of resources on pursuits that don't serve the greater good. Zara looked up from the communication systems, her face pale. Captain, he's not wrong about the invasion. I'm seeing massive fleet concentrations throughout Void collective space. This isn't just an invasion, it's a complete mobilization. They're committing everything to this assault. Because they believe they have perfect intelligence on our defensive positions. Amelia realized. Intelligence that you've been providing. Among other services. Valerius confirmed. But my greatest contribution has been the systematic weakening of imperial institutions over the past decade. Marcus 9 was simply the final piece, a puppet to sign the orders that would ensure your defeat. Then help us turn it around, Amelia said, playing her last diplomatic card. You know the Empire better than anyone. Help us make it worthy of survival. For a moment, something flickered in Valerius's eyes, doubt, perhaps, or the ghost of the loyalty he had once felt. But it vanished quickly, replaced by the cold certainty of a man who had already made his choice. The Empire's time is over, Captain. The future belongs to the collective. Then we'll have to build a different future, Amelia replied. Zara, status on the communication systems? I'm in. I have access to all their command networks, including direct links to the Void collective invasion fleets. I can send false intelligence, tactical updates, whatever we need. Do it. Tell them our defensive positions have been shifted, that our main fleets are concentrated in sectors they've already bypassed. Give Admiral Reyes every advantage we can. As Zara worked to turn Valerius's own communication network against his allies, Amelia found herself facing a man who represented everything she had sworn to protect, and everything she had to destroy to save it. The irony was bitter. To preserve the Empire, they had to defeat its rightful heir. But as the hours ticked down toward the greatest battle in galactic history, Amelia held fast to a simple truth. The Empire wasn't perfect, but it offered something the Void collective never could, the right to remain human, flawed and individual and free. That was worth fighting for. That was worth dying for. The invasion was about to begin. Admiral Reyes stood on the bridge of the Imperium, watching as 47 Imperial fleets took their positions along the outer rim. Thanks to Captain Chen's intelligence, they knew exactly when and where the Void collective would strike. But knowing and stopping were two very different things. Admiral, came the voice of his tactical officer. Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures throughout sectors 7 through 12. Whatever's coming, it's bigger than anything in our historical records. Through the viewports, space appeared empty, but Reyes knew that appearance was deceptive. Void collective vessels used quantum stealth technology that rendered them invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. The Empire's forces were essentially fighting ghosts. Communications from Captain Chen's team? Ongoing transmission of false intelligence to enemy forces, sir. They're feeding the collective outdated fleet positions and fabricated defensive capabilities. But we won't know how effective it is until the shooting starts. Aboard Sanctuary Station, Amelia coordinated the deception campaign while keeping watch over their prisoner. Valerius had remained silent since his capture, but his eyes tracked every piece of false intelligence they transmitted through his communication networks. Zara, what's the status on collective fleet movements? They're definitely responding to our false intelligence. I'm seeing course corrections that suggest they believe our primary defensive fleets are concentrated in the wrong sectors. It's buying us tactical advantage, but Captain. She paused, analyzing incoming data streams. The numbers are staggering. I count over 3,000 capital ships in the first wave alone. Amelia felt her heart skip. The entire Imperial Navy consisted of roughly 800 capital ships scattered across 47 galaxies. Even concentrated for this battle, They were facing impossible odds. They're not just planning to defeat us, Lieutenant Commander Voss realized. They're planning to obliterate any possibility of resistance. Which is why we need every advantage we can get, Amelia replied. Major Harrison, what's our exit strategy if this station is discovered? Limited options. We're in neutral space, surrounded by collective forces, and our transport wouldn't survive 5 minutes in open combat. Basically, we're committed until this is resolved one way or another. From his position under guard, Valerius finally spoke. You're all going to die, you know. The collective doesn't leave survivors when it encounters resistance. Your fleets, your worlds, your civilization, all of it will be processed into raw material for the next expansion. Maybe, Amelia acknowledged. But we're going to make them pay a price they'll remember for 1,000 years. The first indication of battle came not from their sensors, but from the communication networks. Zara's infiltration of Void Collective command systems provided real-time intelligence on their attack coordination. On her displays, hundreds of enemy formations appeared like drops of blood spreading through Imperial space. Contact! She announced. Massive collective formations dropping out of hyperspace in 17 different sectors. Admiral Reyes was right. They're hitting us everywhere at once. Imperial Fleet response? Third Fleet is engaging in Sector 9. Admiral Torres reports, heavy fighting. Enemy vessels are larger than expected, with defensive capabilities beyond our estimates. Through the captured communication networks, they listened to the battle unfold across dozens of systems. Imperial commanders reported enemy vessels that seemed to absorb weapons fire, collective boarding parties that converted captured personnel into additional troops, and strategic coordination that suggested a single controlling intelligence. It's worse than we thought, Major Harrison observed. They're not just militarily superior, they're operating as a unified organism. No communication delays, no conflicting orders, no individual hesitation. While our forces are scattered across impossible distances, operating with normal human limitations, Voss added grimly. But as the battle progressed, something unexpected began to happen. The false intelligence they had transmitted was creating chaos in collective formations. Enemy fleets found themselves engaging phantom defensive positions while Imperial forces struck from unexpected angles. Zara, can you access their tactical communications? Already monitoring. Captain, they're confused. The collective intelligence is trying to reconcile conflicting data about our positions and capabilities. They're adapting, but it's taking time. How much time? Unknown. But every minute of confusion is another minute our fleets can use to concentrate their forces. Admiral Reyes had deployed the Imperial strategy known as the Alexandrian Gambit, appearing to retreat while drawing enemy forces into prepared killing fields. But the strategy required precise timing and complete coordination between dozens of fleet commanders operating across light years of space. 9th Fleet reports successful withdrawal from Sector 4. Came the tactical update. Collective forces are pursuing as expected. Admiral Keene requests confirmation on trap activation timing. Tell him to wait for the convergence signal, Reyes replied. We get one chance at this. The convergence signal would coordinate simultaneous attacks by all Imperial forces, creating the maximum concentration of firepower at the moment when collective forces were most extended. But it also meant abandoning any pretense of defending Imperial worlds. Everything depended on destroying enough enemy forces to make continued invasion impossible. On Sanctuary Station, Amelia watched the battle unfold through intercepted communications, knowing that the fate of trillions hung in the balance. If the Imperial forces failed, the Void Collective would process the galaxy's population into raw material for their next expansion. If they succeeded, the Empire might survive to face the challenges of rebuilding and reform. Captain, Zara's voice carried a note of excitement. I'm detecting something unusual in the collective communications. Their coordination is starting to break down in sectors where we've inflicted heavy casualties. It's like they're losing pieces of themselves. The collective consciousness is taking damage, Valerius said quietly. Destroy enough of their vessels, and the remaining forces lose coordination efficiency. You're helping us now? Amelia asked skeptically. I'm stating a fact. The collective's greatest strength becomes a weakness when faced with sufficient resistance. But Captain, his voice carried a warning. If you don't achieve complete victory, the survivors will adapt and return stronger than before. This is your only chance. As if summoned by his words, Admiral Reyes' voice came through the communication network. All Imperial forces, prepare for convergence. Operation Aurelius begins in 60 seconds. Amelia realized they were about to witness either the Empire's greatest victory or its final defeat. 8 centuries of human civilization balanced on the edge of a blade, and there was nothing more they could do but watch and hope that the forces of freedom were strong enough to prevail. The fate of the galaxy would be decided in the next few minutes. All Imperial forces, execute Operation Aurelius. Convergence authorized. Admiral Reyes' words echoed across 47 different star systems as the largest military operation in galactic history reached its climax. Throughout the Outer Rim territories, Imperial fleets that had appeared to be retreating in disorder suddenly reversed course, revealing their true positions and intentions. Aboard Sanctuary Station, Amelia watched the coordination unfold through captured void collective communication networks. The enemy's confident pursuit formations found themselves caught in carefully prepared crossfires as Imperial forces emerged from concealment in asteroid fields, behind planetary shields, and within the gravitational shadows of gas giants. Zara, what's the tactical situation? Chaos, came the immediate reply. Beautiful, wonderful case. The collective formations were expecting to engage scattered defensive forces. Instead, they're facing concentrated Imperial fleets with overlapping fields of fire. The holographic displays showed the battle in devastating detail. Void collective vessels, massive and seemingly invulnerable to individual ship attacks, found themselves overwhelmed by coordinated firepower from entire fleet formations. Ships that had absorbed the energy of dozens of Imperial vessels finally succumbed when faced with concentrated barrages from hundreds. Fourth Fleet reports successful elimination of collective forces in Sector 12. Lieutenant Commander Voss relayed. Admiral Torres confirms complete tactical surprise achieved. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Imperial casualty reports flooded the communication networks as brave crews sacrificed themselves to ensure killing blows against collective vessels. Each enemy ship destroyed required the combined firepower of multiple Imperial formations, and the mathematics of attrition were grim. 7th Fleet has taken severe casualties, Major Harrison reported. Admiral Chun requests immediate support in Sector 15. No support available, came Admiral Reyes' response. All fleets are committed. 7th Fleet is to maintain engagement until tactical objectives are achieved. Amelia closed her eyes, knowing that maintain engagement until tactical objectives are achieved was military code for fight to the death. Somewhere in Sector 15, thousands of Imperial personnel were following orders that would save the galaxy at the cost of their lives. Captain, Zara's voice carried a note of wonder. The collective command structure is starting to fragment. I'm seeing communication delays, conflicting orders, and tactical confusion in their remaining formations. From his position under guard, Valerius watched the displays with an expression of growing disbelief. Impossible. The collective consciousness doesn't fragment. It adapts, learns, overcomes. Maybe it does, Amelia replied. But right now it's losing. The turning point came in Sector 9, where Admiral Keen's 3rd Fleet had lured the largest collective formation into a gravity well near the system's primary star. As the enemy vessels maneuvered to escape the gravitational trap, they found themselves caught between converging Imperial forces and the star's deadly radiation. 3rd Fleet reports complete elimination of collective command formation, the communication network announced. Enemy coordination in Sectors 7 through 12 has collapsed. Zara, can you confirm? Confirmed. I'm seeing massive disruption in their communication networks. It's like watching a neural network shut down section by section. Without central coordination, the Void Collective's greatest advantage, perfect tactical unity, disappeared. Individual ship commanders reverted to programmed behaviors, but those behaviors had been designed for use within a unified command structure. Isolated from the collective consciousness, they became predictable and vulnerable. Imperial forces, trained for independent operation and familiar with the chaos of individual decision-making, pressed their advantage ruthlessly. Fleet after fleet of collective vessels found themselves outmaneuvered by opponents who thrived on improvisation and individual initiative. Admiral Reyes reports successful engagement in the primary sector, Voss announced. Collective command vessel eliminated, remaining enemy forces in full retreat. But Amelia knew the battle wasn't over. Through the captured communication systems, she could see collective forces regrouping in deep space, beyond the reach of immediate Imperial pursuit. The invasion had been stopped, but the Void Collective itself remained intact. They're withdrawing to regroup, she told her team. This victory buys us time, but it doesn't end the threat. Actually, Zara said slowly, studying data streams from the deepest levels of collective communication networks. I think it might. Captain, I'm seeing something unprecedented. The collective consciousness isn't just regrouping, it's fragmenting permanently. Explain. The damage to their command structure was more than tactical. When we destroyed those command vessels, we eliminated critical nodes in their collective intelligence. The remaining formations are reverting to individual consciousness. Valerius stared at the displays in shock. That's impossible. Collective consciousness is irreversible. Once a being is incorporated, unless the incorporation was incomplete, Dr. Vasquez's voice came through their communication link. She had been monitoring the battle from Admiral Reyes' flagship, analyzing the psychological aspects of the collective's breakdown. If the process maintains some level of individual identity, traumatic separation from the collective consciousness could restore autonomous thought. You're saying we freed them? Amelia asked. Some of them, at least. The communication patterns I'm seeing suggest thousands of individual vessels are no longer responding to collective directives. They're lost, confused, but thinking for themselves again. As the immediate battle wound down, Imperial forces began the complex task of securing the battlefield and assessing the strategic situation. The Void Collective invasion had been decisively defeated, but the political crisis within the Empire remained unresolved. Admiral Reyes to Captain Chen, came the call she had been expecting. Immediate return to Imperial space required. We have an empire to save. Amelia looked at Valerius, who sat in stunned silence as the dreams of decades crumbled around him. Admiral Constantine, you're going to help us clean up the mess you made. Why would I do that? Because the alternative is watching trillions of people suffer for your mistakes. The Empire may be flawed, but it's still better than chaos. For the first time since his capture, Valerius looked uncertain. The absolute conviction that had driven him for decades had been shattered by the collective's defeat. And if I refuse? Then you'll spend the rest of your life knowing you could have helped rebuild something better and chose not to. As their transport prepared for departure from Sanctuary Station, Amelia reflected on the battle's outcome. They had saved the Empire, but at a cost measured in hundreds of thousands of lives. The victory was real, but so was the need for the reforms that would prevent another such crisis. The hardest battle, rebuilding trust in imperial institutions, was just beginning. New Rome had never seen a gathering like the one that filled the great amphitheater of the Senate building. Representatives from 47 galaxies, military commanders still bearing the scars of the recent battle, and civilian leaders who had risked everything to preserve imperial democracy crowded into a space designed for formal deliberation. At the center of it all stood Emperor Marcus IX, his elaborate robes unable to hide the fear in his eyes as the evidence of his crimes was presented to the assembled multitude. Captain Amelia Chen took the witness stand with the weight of the galaxy's attention upon her. The past week had been a whirlwind of depositions, intelligence briefings, and political negotiations as the full scope of the conspiracy became public knowledge. Now came the moment of final accounting. Captain Chen, Senator Paxtor of the Centauri delegation began. Please tell the Senate what your investigation discovered about the individual known as Emperor Marcus IX. Amelia looked directly at the false emperor as she spoke. Senator, our investigation revealed that Marcus IX is not a member of the Aurelius dynasty. Genetic analysis confirms he shares no blood relationship with any previous emperor. Furthermore, financial records show he received over 10 trillion credits from Void Collective sources over a 3-year period. Gasps echoed through the amphitheater as the implications sank in. The Empire's divine right of succession, foundation of its legitimacy for 8 centuries, had been compromised by external enemies. And what was the purpose of this conspiracy? To destroy the Empire from within while facilitating external conquest by the Void Collective. Marcus IX was a puppet, placed in position to weaken our defenses and provide intelligence to invasion forces. Dr. Elena Vasquez presented the genealogical evidence next, her academic precision making the betrayal even more devastating. The man who had claimed the throne of 47 galaxies was revealed as a fraud, his entire identity manufactured by enemy intelligence services. But the most damaging testimony came from an unexpected source. Admiral Valerius Constantine entered the amphitheater under heavy guard, his appearance sending shock waves through the assembly. Most believed him dead for 10 years. Seeing him alive and in custody for treason shattered fundamental assumptions about imperial security. Admiral Constantine, Senator Paxtor continued, you have agreed to testify in exchange for consideration during sentencing. Tell the Senate, what was your role in this conspiracy? Valerius stood with the bearing of a man who had commanded fleets and shaped galactic policy. Even in defeat, his presence commanded attention. I orchestrated the entire operation. The Void Collective conspiracy, Marcus IX's false identity, the systematic corruption of imperial institutions, all of it was my design. Why? For a moment, the old admiral seemed to struggle with the question. Because I believed the Empire was doomed. Corruption, stagnation, the inevitable decline of all civilizations. I thought it was better to control the collapse than to watch it happen through incompetence. So you allied with humanity's enemies? I allied with what I believed was the future. The Void Collective offered unity, efficiency, purpose. I was wrong. He looked directly at Marcus IX, who sat pale and silent in the defendant's dock. I was wrong about many things. The trial continued for days, revealing the full scope of the conspiracy. 87 government officials had been compromised by collective gold. Military supply chains had been redirected to arm invasion forces. Even the Emperor's medical staff had been infiltrated to ensure Constantine's death would go unquestioned. But as the evidence mounted, a strange thing began to happen. Rather than collapsing under the weight of betrayal, the Empire began to strengthen. The revelation of the conspiracy created a unity of purpose that had been missing for decades. Worlds that had been drifting apart rediscovered their shared identity in the face of external threat. Captain Chin, Senator Paxtor asked during the final day of testimony, what is your assessment of the Empire's current condition? Amelia had given this question considerable thought. Senator, the Empire faces serious challenges. The conspiracy exposed real weaknesses in our institutions, and those weaknesses must be addressed. But the battle against the Void Collective also demonstrated our greatest strength. When threatened, free beings will fight to remain free. And your recommendations for preventing such a crisis in the future? Reform, Senator. Real reform of the systems that allowed this conspiracy to flourish. Greater transparency in government, improved oversight of military supply chains, and most importantly, a renewal of the democratic principles that made the Empire worth defending in the first place. The sentencing phase brought its own drama. Marcus IX, faced with irrefutable evidence of his crimes, chose to cooperate fully with imperial authorities. His testimony led to the identification and arrest of dozens of additional conspirators, effectively dismantling the entire network. Admiral Valerius Constantine received a sentence of life imprisonment, though his cooperation earned him confinement on a secure colony world rather than execution. The Empire is stronger than I gave it credit for, he said during his final statement. Perhaps there is hope for reform after all. The constitutional crisis posed by Marcus Ix's false reign was resolved through an emergency session of the Council of 12. With no clear successor in the Aurelius line, they voted to restore the empire's original democratic foundations, establishing a new constitutional monarchy with stronger legislative oversight. Princess Elena Aurelius, Constantine's legitimate daughter who had been living in exile, was recalled to serve as the new empress. Her first act was to establish a commission on imperial reform, tasked with preventing future conspiracies while preserving the empire's essential character. 6 months after the Battle of the Outer Rim, Captain Amelia Chen stood once again on the observation deck of the Meridian, watching the controlled chaos of Nexus Station's traffic patterns. But this time, the ships carried messages of renewal rather than the seeds of conspiracy. The reformation of imperial institutions had proceeded faster than anyone expected. The crisis had created a political opportunity that reformers had seized with both hands. Corruption investigations, democratic reforms, and military reorganization were transforming the empire from within. "Captain," Lieutenant Commander Voss reported from the bridge, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Empress Elena." The holographic projector displayed the young empress in her office on New Rome, surrounded by the symbolic trappings of 8 centuries of imperial tradition. But her words spoke of change rather than continuity. "Captain Chen, your service to the Empire has been exemplary. I'm pleased to inform you that you've been selected to head the new Imperial Intelligence Oversight Committee. Your first assignment will be to ensure that our intelligence services never again pose a threat to the democracy they're sworn to protect." It was the kind of assignment that would make her many enemies among the old guard, but Amelia found herself smiling. The Empire had always been at its best when it embraced change rather than fighting it. "Marcus 9 and his co-conspirators have been transferred to the rehabilitation facility on Sanctuary Station," the Empress continued. "Admiral Constantine has agreed to assist in their psychological treatment. It seems even traitors can find redemption if they're willing to work for it." The irony wasn't lost on Amelia. The very station where they had captured the architect was now being converted into a center for healing the psychological wounds his conspiracy had inflicted. The Void Collective survivors continued to show signs of recovering individual consciousness, Dr. Vasquez reported in a separate briefing. "Many are requesting asylum in Imperial space, hoping to rebuild their lives free from collective control. We're treating them as refugees rather than enemies." Major Harrison, newly promoted to colonel and assigned to train the reformed Imperial Guard, added his own perspective. "The military reforms are proceeding well. Decentralized command structure, improved oversight, and a renewed emphasis on defending democratic values rather than just imperial territory." As the various reports concluded, Amelia reflected on the events that had brought them to this point. The conspiracy had nearly destroyed the empire, but it had also forced a reckoning with fundamental questions about power, legitimacy, and the price of freedom. Tech specialist Zara Kim, now heading the cybersecurity division, had perhaps put it best. "The empire was like a computer system that had never been properly debugged. The crisis forced us to examine every line of code, every assumption, every process. What we're building now is more secure because it's been tested under the worst possible conditions." Through the viewport, Amelia could see ships from dozens of species, carrying goods and passengers throughout Imperial space. The diversity that had once been seen as a weakness was now recognized as the Empire's greatest strength. No single point of failure, no uniform vulnerability that enemies could exploit. The Stellar Empire had survived its greatest crisis and emerged stronger than before. The price had been terrible, hundreds of thousands of lives lost in the battle, billions more whose trust in their government had been shattered by the conspiracy. But from that devastation had come the opportunity for true renewal. As the Meridian prepared to depart Nexus Station for its new assignment patrolling the reformed Outer Rim defenses, Amelia composed her final report on the conspiracy investigation. The words came easily, summarizing not just the facts of the case but its larger significance. The conspiracy led by Admiral Valerius Constantine and the false Emperor Marcus 9 represented an existential threat to the Stellar Empire. But it also demonstrated that our civilization's greatest strength lies not in its military might or territorial extent, but in the willingness of free beings to defend their freedom. The Empire has survived for 8 centuries not because it was perfect, but because it was capable of change. When faced with corruption, it could reform. When threatened by enemies, it could unite. When challenged by new ideas, it could adapt. The events of the past year have tested all of these capabilities. The Empire has emerged from that test with renewed purpose and strengthened institutions. The democratic principles that were always at the heart of our civilization have been reaffirmed and protected. The stars belong to those brave enough to defend them. Today, tomorrow, and for centuries to come, that means us. Captain Amelia Chin sealed the report and transmitted it to the Imperial Archives, where it would join 8 centuries of records documenting humanity's greatest adventure, the attempt to build a civilization worthy of the stars. Outside the viewport, those stars wheeled in their eternal dance, no longer indifferent to the human drama but witnesses to something remarkable, a galaxy where freedom had not just survived, but flourished. The Empire endured, and in enduring, it had learned to become something better than it had been before. The greatest victory of all.